see you guys in the dark.
So quick background to the story is that I was born and raised in an extremely close and big family. We all lived within a mile from each other around a large park in a small Texas town. Unrelated fun fact for those horror fans out there, this park is the present-day location of the majority of the town that dreaded sundown murders. Now my family was jam-packed full of aunts and uncles, and I'd say I saw them all at least once a week for my entire childhood. I can't stress enough how close we were all growing up, and how trusted they were as it plays an important part of this story. So the story came up recently between my older brother, my mother, and I. I opened up about a series of nightmares I have been basically plagued with for as long as I can remember. These nightmares are always very similar, and basically always consist of me, as a small child in my childhood home, attempting to escape my house while something horrible chases me. The something is never actually visually seen, but is more like I sense this massive looming person reaching out at me from the dark, and it always catches me before I can even get outside. This usually results in me waking up in a sweat. These dreams always seem to center around these very vague yet oddly detailed memories of a babysitter I once had. Here's where it gets odd. These memories I have are almost like dreams. I very specifically remember the details of what was happening and the feelings I had during, but everything else was just out of reach. That goes for the babysitter herself as well. I remember it was a white female who was middle-aged, but I can't for the life of me recall her face. In my memories, it's like I never really got a good look of her. The two specific incidences I remember were not happy ones. The first memory I have is that, however, when I get in trouble for what I have no memory of, I would be forced to sit outside on the back porch in shorts and a t-shirt during wintertime. I remember because I would shiver and sit there quietly, scared. Complaining would cause more problems. The second memory was even worse to me. The babysitter loved to play this game she made up. She would turn off all the lights in the house and go hide deep in one of the back rooms. I was left in the front room and told that if I wanted food or to watch TV, I had to find her first. I never had any idea where she was hiding, and if I ever found her, she would jump out screaming like a mad woman and chase me. I remember her laughter at my fear. I remember often being so frozen with terror that I would sit on the ground near the front door, too scared to find her. No matter how long I waited, she would never come out of hiding, no matter how hungry I got. I specifically remember this one time very well. I was so little and scared. I was whimpering as I slowly built up bravery to walk the back hallway looking for her. My hunger felt deadly at this point, and I wanted to find her. I checked bathrooms, bedrooms, and closets. Nothing. She was nowhere. I remember standing in my parents' bedroom trying to figure out where she could be when I saw her. She was a dark shape under the big bed, peeking at me from under the bed skirt. We stared at each other unmoving. I wouldn't make out her face, but I knew she was smiling at me. She was like a crazy, feral animal under there. I remember her sliding herself along the floor so fast, I screamed and turned to run as she made it to her feet. And then the memory goes dark. I don't know what happened after that, and that scares me just as much as the memory I do have of the event. I never shared these memories because they seemed so distant, and I often wondered if they were even real. One day when I was in my 20s, I mentioned the nightmare to my mother and brother when we were sitting around talking during one of the weeks where my brother and I were home from college. We often would do this to tell funny stories and remember all of the kids we knew from long before. When I decided to ask my mom about the babysitter, she seemed confused and told me she never hired babysitters for either I or my brother. Because of how big and close my family was and how protective my mom was of us, she never trusted anyone but family to watch us. My aunts and grandmothers were the absolute opposite of the woman I ever remembered. Loving, kind, fun, and treated me like their own children. I couldn't imagine them doing those things to me. My mom genuinely seemed confused, but also slightly worried like a mother would be hearing such a horrible story. She told me she truly couldn't even begin to imagine who I was talking about. With her certainty, and with memories of being so vague in important places, I decided I must have imagined it all. Then my brother brought it up again the next day when we were driving together. "Yeah, I remember that," he said with some concern in his voice. "Like I remember seeing you get taken outside and being forced to sit there. And I thought it was so horrible. I don't know why we never told anyone." He too had no memory of who the woman was, but he remembers feeling defenseless over the whole thing. He only had vague memories of the horrible game she would play, but pointed out how he was absolutely no memory of her ever targeting him with her torment. He remembers the events as if he were an audience member. He did, however, remember things I didn't. This included that I often got in trouble because I would often use my imagination to tell stories, and that the babysitter would often get mad when she realized it was not true at all. This resulted in me getting kicked out of the house. I just want to point out that my brother is only 1 year older than I am, so he too would have been very little. I have thought about bringing it back up to my mom, but I honestly trust that she has no idea who I'm talking about, and I don't want to make her feel horrible about something so long ago that she clearly has no idea about. I just wish I could understand what happened and who the hell she was. My brother never brought it up again after, but told me at the time that he always played that memory off as being so young and just misunderstanding whatever happening. All I do know is, babysitter from my nightmares, let's never meet again, not even in my sleep. This happened when I was 12. I was babysitting for a family with 2 little girls. I babysat for them fairly frequently, and they lived around the corner from me. The father was weird and intense, would ask me to do weird things like be a bartender at a party they were throwing, or encourage me to try on his wife's clothing and play dress-up. He asked personal questions about my boyfriends and what I did with them. The wife was never around for these interactions. One night I was babysitting, and after putting the girls to bed, I started hearing weird sounds coming from upstairs. I was about to have my dad come and investigate for me, when the father came down the stairs wearing nothing but his tighty-whities. He had been there the whole time waiting for his girls to go to bed. I jumped up and ran for the door, and he called after me that he hadn't been feeling good, so he stayed home, and that he would pay me. I just left and booked it home. I was weirdly embarrassed, so I didn't tell my parents. I just decided I'd never babysit for them again. After that, my mom started getting weird phone calls while I was at school. Someone just breathing into the phone or asking if I was home. This was before cell phones and caller ID. That culminated with her getting a phone call where a man told my mother that he was going to get me and detailed exactly what he was planning on doing to me. My mom never told me exactly what he said, but it was bad enough she called the police. The police were able to track the number to the creepy father. I didn't know what was happening until the cops showed up to my school to escort me home, because the creepy father wasn't home. He was outside my school, waiting on me to get out. The man went to jail, and then to inpatient psychiatric ward. He sent me letters from the hospital, which was in violation of the RO we had been granted. So he went from the hospital back to jail. So hey, man in your underwear, let's never meet again, okay? When I was about 8, a neighbor named Dave, who was probably 15 or so at the time, took a sudden interest in playing with me. He would talk with me when I walked our dog around the block. He'd invite himself over to my house and play with me in our backyard. I remember him showing up when I was at the library, and we looked at books together. This went on for a brief period, and I remember thinking it was pretty awesome an older kid wanted to hang out with me. Dave told me I was fun and smart and very pretty. One day we were in my bedroom with the door open and my mom close by. I remember him trying to close the door a couple of times, and I kept opening it because I knew my mom would get mad at me. I remember that annoying me, but I think I was too young for that to alarm me. This is weird, and looking back on this, I cringe. When he was in my room, he asked me if I'd like it if he babysat for me sometime. I said yes, and told him I'd ask my parents. When my dad got home, I asked him. I remember him looking puzzled and talking to my mom privately. A few days later, my mom and I came home, and Dave and my dad were talking in our living room. When Dave saw me, he waved excitedly, and my dad turned around with his not freaking around face on. I darted upstairs. Later on, my dad came into my room and said that Dave needs to find friends his own age, and he didn't want us to hang out anymore. Later on in the night, I overheard my dad telling my mom something about that creep, and her responding with, "I'm so naive," and crying. I remember feeling totally sad and guilty. Dave made a few attempts to approach me in the neighborhood after that, but never came over to our house again. He gradually faded out of my life as quickly and strangely as he entered it. Dave burned down our small town video store that he worked at, and I didn't see him again. This happened ages ago when I used to babysit. I was maybe 13, living in the countryside, and was babysitting most of the children in my street. This particular neighborhood would love to go out on Wednesday, because there was this lane dance party class going on in a nearby bar, so I was used to babysit for her. I knew she had always come back very late. That specific night, the oldest of the three was a little difficult and didn't want to go to sleep. I struggled with putting him to bed, and afterwards I was very tired. I studied my math a little, and around midnight decided to take a nap until the kid's mom came back. A few minutes after falling asleep, I hear someone frantically knocking on the door, trying to open it. It was the neighbor with her 2 young children. It was winter, and we could easily have had 3 feet of snow, and temperature outside must have been around 23 degrees Celsius. The kids only had their pajamas on and an unzipped jacket. She was wearing jeans, a wool shirt, and winter boots. I could see the fear in her eyes as I struggled to unlock the door. I panicked and had her walk all the way around the house to the patio door. When she got in, she quickly told me to bring all the children downstairs, turn off the lights, and not to answer the door to anyone. The kids kept asking, "Who is Daddy going to hurt? Who is Daddy going to hurt?" And she kept muting them, saying nothing was going to happen, and she left. I woke up all the kids, brought them all into the playroom in the basement, and asked them to play quietly. The eldest, who hadn't been asleep very long, was asking what was going on, and I kept telling him it was a special occasion where he could play late. I calmed down the other 2 kids, telling them no one was going to be hurt, but in my mind, my time had come. I could see myself being shot while trying to protect the kids. I was trying to figure out how to stay alive, or at least how to keep them alive. I wasn't trying to be a hero, but I was trying to convince myself that if it came down to that, I would have to try and protect them. I called 911, but started shaking and crying so much I didn't know what to do. I called my mom and told her quickly what was going on, and she called the cops and joined me. As she got in the driveway, the neighbor's husband was walking up the street with a huge axe. My mom got into the house, locked the door, and cracked open a window, and asked what was going on while he was approaching the house. He asked her to come out and confront him, thinking it was his wife. My mother then explained to him she was the babysitter's mother, and came after getting a worried 13-year-old's call. He then asked us to give him his wife, but we didn't know where she was. He argued a little bit with my mom, but she was so calm, it calmed him down. I still admire her for that night. After 10 to 15 minutes of arguing, he walked back home carrying his axe, and a few seconds later, his wife knocked on the patio door behind the house and came in. She was crying and was apologizing to my mother for the whole situation. She thought her neighbor was home, not the babysitter. My mother asked me to go check on the kids while she was taking care of the wife. A few minutes later, 2 police cars arrive, and they come in. Spent time with the wife, asking tons of questions, then me and my mother. In the meantime, the woman I was babysitting for arrived. They interviewed her too. They asked me and my mom if they were ready to go to court if the woman pressed charges against her husband. Surprisingly, she never did. Turns out she had just announced to her firefighter husband that she was sleeping with her boss in order to get a raise because they were struggling financially. He got his firefighting axe and said he was going to hurt the bastard, but she wasn't going to stop him. That's why she brought the kids and left. I was always scared of him afterwards, and whenever I saw his children, I would check if they had any signs of violence, but they moved about 6 months after that, and we moved 2 years later. So let's not meet ever again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.